such a fascinating talk because so much of dance on screen in itself exists on social media as well. And it's quite rare that we get to hear that perspective of things because it's such a part of this technological world that we live in right now. And even just before we came in here, we were giving Instagram tutorials to some people who wanted to work out how to share stories and do all these sort of things. So it's really become a part of almost everyday life now. And this is a question for you specifically, but also if you guys want to answer as well. Have you thought about making your film specifically for the phone? Because when I started making work, I was making just single screen works and I was thinking about the cinema screen, maybe a laptop as well. But you see now Instagram has this thing called IGTV. I don't know if you guys know about it, but it's where you can screen films on the full length of the phone. So people are now starting to put their works onto these platforms. And I wondered whether you ever thought of making specifically for the phone and whether that might attract that audience in more ways.
Yeah, so basically my film, the art certificate, is very focused on the social media actually. That's why I choose like only 3 minutes. Because like when we are doing the social media, then if the videos are like more than like 5 minutes, then they just like swiped. Because like they feel like it's too much like that. So it's like this year the screen project, the 3 films has to be within the 3 minutes, I guess, okay, 2.5, maybe like 3 minutes. Yeah, so it's like, I know we focus on the social media because like, it's really easy to share the Screen.Dance, you know, yeah.
Have you guys ever made anything for phones, on phones specifically?
Yes,
yeah.
Mostly ads, to be honest, not dance film, but yeah, we would, definitely, yeah.
Haven't done anything, and I sincerely don't plan to make anything at this time. Yeah, I mean, like, it's just because of the type of film I make is more like story driven, and that takes time to get the plot going, and you know, all the gaps have to be connected, and in 5 minutes it's very tough, you know, to kind of put something together. So we had to be a different kind of format, which I'll be open, but right now I'm concentrating more on storytelling with Screen.Dance as opposed to just, you know, the whole piece to be just about movement. So, yeah, different formats.
And continuing with you, Rodrigo, I've been going, I came from the dance route. So when I was learning film, it was a lot of what Joe was saying, YouTubing, Googling, how to do this and how to do that. And what you find these YouTube tutorials that are like, get the cinematic look, get the cinematic grade, and they teach you all these tutorials on how to be cinematic. And I wonder, as a person who's come from the other route down, what does the word cinematic mean for you?
Awesome. That's what I teach to my kids, right? I mean, oh, come on. I mean, like, there's some tips that we give to the students, for instance. It's always stage the acting in the foreground as opposed to the background, just because of the lens, it will kind of create the depth that we always go after. Not that the flatness is bad, but it has a special place. So sometimes we want to be cartoonish, two-dimensional, but it has to fit a special project or a special scene. So sometimes it's interesting to kind of see the people that go against the grain and they break the rule, but it has to be done well, so you kind of like, yeah, right? So that'll be one. Lighting is everything. I didn't do any lighting on my show, which is very difficult from someone that teaches lighting, right? But I have to pass on that responsibility to the cinematographer on my show, that's a very interesting, you know, kind of like balance. And basically we discussed the look of things, and at that point you just trust the person who's going to execute the way it was discussed. But the light has to create brights and darks. It can't just be bright, it cannot just be dark. So you have to kind of be able to see, you know, some shapes, but also not in the old school way. We don't want to see the old school lighting, right? I mean, like, it's just like yesterday we saw future or forward-thinking editing in the films. We saw a lot of forward-thinking, the way it was cut. Mine is a bit more old school, right? The lighting has to do the same. The light has to be a little more forward-thinking, not the 3-point line. If you say 3-point lining, I kind of like, girl, go away, because like this is not what I do, right? Because you want to be a little more gutsy with that. I don't know if that.
Thank you. And Abby, in your as I was reading on each of you on the way down, it says that you foster long-standing collaborations. And I just wondered if there's any tips on how to ensure longevity in the people that we collaborate with, because sometimes we might collaborate with an artist and then move on to work with maybe someone else, or I was wondering if there's any things that you do to ensure that we can keep that connection with those fleeting collaborations that might happen.
I think it's good and it's bad, if I'm totally honest, because my DOP that I worked with on this, I've worked with him probably since I graduated, to be honest, and I recently, he wasn't available on a job and I used another DOP, and I'm not going to name any names, but it wasn't, I think it's just having that understanding of each other, is that, yeah. But on the other hand, I think you should work with others. I think it's important that you know, Andrew and I just gel. Like if I'm in a panic about something, he can think ahead of me sometimes, and he knows me as a director. Whereas he's just a really good example actually. Yeah, and I have worked with a number of different people, but yeah, once you get that kind of groove with somebody, I think you know when it works and you know when it really doesn't. And on this, for me, I wanted to work with people that I absolutely know and trust, because it was it's been a long time coming, and it's important to know everybody's capable, and it was a team effort. So
yeah, just as you were saying, it takes a lot of time to develop that trust with collaborators sometimes, so we do tend to want to hold on to those people that we feel that we gel with. Yeah, definitely. Cool, great. I'm going to pass it on to the audience now. Do you guys have oh, there we go, straight up. Yes, we missed you last time, so we'll get you this time. Anna's got the mic there.
Thanks all for the presentations, they're really interesting. I just want to say to Rodrigo, I really loved your film. I don't think I've ever seen something quite like that. 4, is it 4 or number 4?
4.
4. And it had a kind of feel of Hitchcock, 1984, David Lynch, and Rocha-Campos. So I just want to ask a very straightforward question, where you got the original idea for it. And my second question is that sort of circular piece of furniture that was to the left, with any particular significance of that? My eye kept going to it when I wasn't looking at the lovely kind of spinning top, the creepy spinning top. Can't say it right. Okay, thanks. And I loved all the other films as well. I don't want to hog the afternoon.
I get inspiration from music and from photos. So I start like, okay, I'm ready for my next film. I always have themes that I want to kind of, put a voice to it. And then all I need is to turn some music that inspires me, and then just start flipping books and flipping, like photos and going online. And then I start seeing some elements that speak to me, and then I start like kind of crafting something. So like, it's like a puzzle that you start adding the pieces, right? And then once I have sort of like the frame, then I like to type in script format, just because of the amount of beats, character beats and story beats that I cannot miss. So my first 3 films were just sort of like shot list and beat by beat, right? And then I realized that I had to have something a little more, like document, right? Because I have to convey this message to other people. I have to give it to the other key members that need to kind of create their own work as well, right? So, but basically the inspiration comes from like being in your own, empty place, and then with music and with visuals, you can start putting together something.
But was there just one particular moment where you decided that's the kind of film you're going to make for this? It was like a light bulb moment where you thought, I'm going to go in this direction on this film?
Like, I didn't know it was gonna be sci-fi in the beginning. Like, it was actually towards the end I realized, well, this guy has a sci-fi film. Like, because I mean, like, we have like, oh, let's make this light fixture, and let's kind of have some furniture. But until you find those pieces and it's on the set and you have the lighting, that's when the thing kind of comes alive. Because before it's just like random things that are just like piled up over here. The light fixture's off, so you don't know what that's going to happen, right? So it's a very sort of like organic thing. We try to narrow down the pieces we want, right? Like the megaphone with the alarm. Like, I love props. I love props. They for some reason they have a story. You know, the air conditioning that kind of has the air, all those things, you know, when I see, especially old stuff, it speaks to me. So I start collecting that, and, you know, craft a story.
And the object?
The object?
The
cylinder.
The circular.
Left side.
I mean, like, if you kind of, like, you can intellectualize or not, right? But if you were to sort of like put a meaning to that, you notice that the soft round is where the dancer 4, it's standing, and the other side is the metal, hard metal seat, which for the boss. So it's just sort of like a little bit of that, you know, the tough boss has the metal chair, and 4, which is sort of like this conflictive character, right? Strong but weak. She has the soft, round piece next to her. Yeah, it was like basically the base of a table, and they took off the glass, and I saw that piece. I was like, it's in my film. It's gonna be in the film. It's gonna be in the film. We're gonna find a place for that.
Podcasting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Mitch at the back there.
The conventions of form are always in flux. I mean, if we looked at a spectrum of, let's say, at one end we have a flashing white light, and on the other end we have Casablanca. So we saw that happen in dance, that like people were, Martha Graham was, at least modern dance, Martha Graham was telling stories, and then 30 years later, people are just lying on the floor or sitting in a chair. And now, in dance, and really in all of the arts, there's been, you know, we're in the postmodern, or at least not everyone, but there is a postmodern movement of like, let's go back to a certain degree of sentiment, where we begin to touch hearts more than minds, maybe, or at least have that be one of the things that we're pursuing. So everybody has their own feeling about their position of where are they on that spectrum. One might say, I'm interested in like pushing what the form is, and because we can only deconstruct so far until there is no construction. So I just would like to hear each person talk about where do they feel they're at. Like the Instagram piece is really about like kind of deconstructing story and just talking about social media. Rodrigo's yours is a bit, you know, is a third of the way over to the Casablanca side. You know, has an avant-garde look, but there's a traditional story form behind it. So I'd just like to hear where everybody feels they are in storytelling from, you know, more of the classical sense versus just raw sensory impact.
Well, for me, like as I doing my film is like talking about the social media, and it's like represents the reality. So like I'm always like focusing on the time that I'm here, like the present. So like so I think the film has to be like very. I think it's more the it's not a classical way. I think it's more raw things. So it's like I normally go out, like I mean like the outside and then film their parts without any lighting, and then just doing like filming myself with my own dances, because like I don't want to have like big crew for like filming, because it's like that means I create the atmosphere again. So I just want to just go the reality, the present at that moment, like that. So I think I would say like the more raw things, I guess.
Can you give me roughly the question again?
Do you see yourself as a traditional storyteller? That like, I mean, I haven't seen your work before that I know of, and I just saw the prologue here, which looked like, here we go with a conventional story, which is very appealing to me. Do you see yourself as a redefiner of story form, or as more of the classical storyteller?
Somewhere in there. I mean, it is, I do want to tell a story, definitely. I want to tell a story. To be honest, the kind of main thing that I got caught up on was the technicalities, and actually I did get told, just reel it in and think about the choreography and think about what the story is that you're telling, and that was thanks to Simon actually. But ultimately I want to tell the story and it not to be like, wow, how did you do that? It's more just, that's lovely, you know. And I think it is a story. Does that kind of answer the question?
Currently, I like the more traditional approach to storytelling because I want the viewer to be kind of more participant and engaged, like from beginning to end, and to get something more than just the sort of like the experience of watching movement and visuals. They're great, they're well done. Of course, it's beautiful, right? But I find that with my background, it's probably easy to default to traditional storytelling because I'm kind of more comfortable with that. I'm not saying that would not change, but currently I feel that, as something that, I can kind of milk it more and stay, in that format for a while. But I'm kind of open to something totally, different, just to kind of change, because eventually you get tired, right? So then you should just kind of, completely change. But you said something interesting about the size of the crew, right? I get to experiment still at the tiniest crew because my crews are usually large, and I do see sometimes a double-edged sword, right? Like, perhaps because there's so many people and it's so layered, it's very complex, and then you have to kind of just basically, accommodate everything and do by the book and blah, 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 So, sure, you can elevate the craft, you can elevate the production value, but there is a little bit of a hindrance as well, that you will be nice just to be you, and the dancer, and just nothing else. So I still have to experience it. So I'm kind of so jealous of people that can do that, And again, because of my background, I tend to default to what I, being taught and being, and being working. So I tend to, have like all these people around, right? Same thing with the cameras, right? Sometimes we latch on to like we want the best camera. But 2 years ago, I was in a festival in Berlin, and then we were watching all sorts of films. And then in the end, when we were mingling with the filmmakers, I spoke to one, and I said, "What camera you use?" And he said, "iPhone 4." And I was like, and he kept going, and I couldn't, at that point, all I heard was like, oh. Because I was like, how can you shoot a film with an iPhone, right? But that was a great thing for me to hear, because from that moment I realized that equipment should not be the thing for you to make a Screen.Dance film, right? It has to have like substance, and it has to hopefully have story and have style, and you can do those things with the iPhone and be in a film festival. And I loved, to hear that. So.
Can I just say something about the crew situation? I think it's valid doing something yourself, but it's also valid when you do have a large crew. It's, you have to be able to communicate with that whole crew, and sometimes it's about letting go as well, like you were saying about lighting. If you're, if that's your thing, it's you're handing it to somebody else, and if they're not doing it as you want it, it can be a problem. And I think what makes for a good director choreographer as well, if you're able to communicate that across and if you're happy with the results. So in a way I think both are really beneficial. Being able to do it yourself, yep. but then they're going to add to your skill set ultimately as well. So yeah.
Because all these people, the keys, right? The 5 creative keys, right? So be producing, directing, scene, production, design, and post. Right, they all bring their own creativity from your story, from your concept, and potentially they will enrich. So you have to be open to get those ideas, because when you get the right kind of people, the project is just going to bloom, as opposed to just like you be the controlling person saying, no, it's my way, my way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's very nice to have different minds to kind of, make this idea bloom, as opposed to kind of, implode.
Thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed the presentations. I wondered if each of you perhaps could talk a little bit about the communication. I'm not even sure if I mean communication. I think, Rodrigo, if I understood right, there was an idea, and then maybe you worked with the choreographer together, or how that relationship was. I'm quite intrigued to hear about that. So, what role? At what point came the choreographer into the process, and maybe for the others about different sides of crew, maybe then that relationship might be a little different.
I don't tell them how to move or what to do with movement, as long as the movement expresses the emotions that I want. So I don't tell them to raise their arm or to bend their leg. I'm not gonna go there. I don't have the expertise, but as long as it's done in a way to express the emotion, then it's serving my purpose, right? And they also have to kind of, at points, deliver the story beats with the movement. So I feed them a list. So I call a beat-by-beat list from the opening, interior, blah, 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 4 enters the room, and she has a blank stare. So I have to kind of do a list of the emotional content and story beat for each dancer, and give this to them, and then they will craft the choreography on top. So that's sort of the format that I've been doing, and it has worked. I don't know from whom I could learn a different way. So I'm just self-taught in that regards, So I'm it's doing okay, right? So I've been using that system, and then we have the meetings, and we watch the rehearsals, and I say, oh, at this moment I think you forgot to express this, or to sell that point, or the conflict, it's not enough, blah blah blah. So we start building.
No, I can't remember what my follow-up question is. Thank you, really. Maybe.
Anyone else that would like to add to that, or we can move on to the next question?
With regards to choreography?
Just if you have any thoughts about that relationship. I haven't seen your work, so I'd love to hear
The process, I had, on this particular film, I had limitations, and in that I had to create essentially a pattern on the floor with a dancer, and structurally I suppose I came up with sections, and then we were limited to hands and feet, and elbows at one point actually. We didn't use the head, but we tried lots of body parts, and was like, no, that would just, if you used your bum as an etch, it would just be quite a big so we didn't use it. So it was a case of me and Joanne working together, and I allowed her to be a little bit freer, slight improv, but she does quite a lot of structure, I think, from me anyway. So and that's kind of how we came to it.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, like I think it depends on the holding camera actually. It's like I'm from dance field, so like if I choreograph the dancers' movements, then I didn't check like I mean like I normally check the movements, not like the filming things. So it's like if I hold my camera, then I always like you can choreograph yourself like that. But like if I have like another cameraman, then maybe I can choreograph, and also I can be a dancer in the film actually. So I think it depends on the holding camera.
Can I say one more thing? With regards to choreography, what I always do with film, I don't know about you guys, but I always create probably 8 times as much as I'll use. I have to be very kind of, happy to get rid of, to dispose of, and I think that's just how I work. I generally build a bank of choreography that will be limited. So it was a little bit harder on this one, but yeah, that's kind of how I work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about CG, because we have 2 artists here whose work, CG is there, very, clearly, and a lot of work went into both elements, and I just want to hear what it's like to kind of dream something like that, and then end up seeing it on screen, and what that journey's like for each of you. And
we didn't start the process with that in mind. That came from the reality that we couldn't get the spinning top on the hand of the dancer.
Okay.
Again, by like a happy accident, my cinematographer, which happens to be the visual effects artist, we were doing camera tests, and then we kind of had like one of the dancers like just showing her a latex glove, which kind of sounded so good, and she was like standing like this, and then he had the idea to kind of put a prop, right? And then I said, well, if we are going to do that, let's put a spinning top, because it's related to the themes that I'm covering. It's not just something random, right? And then, of course, you create a spinning top on the hand of a person. So it was a practical thing that couldn't be done in camera.
But you could have not had it.
I could not have it.
Well, you could make that choice, either to do it in CGI or not do it.
Or not do it at all. But for me, it was an important moment, because all of a sudden, because like I think we spoke a while about this earlier. Like sometimes during the process, parts of the script or parts of the story takes a bigger, and all of a sudden it becomes a more important piece of the puzzle, and almost kind of creates its own side story. And I thought it was beautiful to kind of have the top which spins. It's almost like it's a dance, right? Which signifies 4, and at that point the boss has the spinning top for her hand, and she has the control. So I thought that was like there were multiple layers that it was really interesting to have, and the practicality, it was impossible. Same thing with the sparks, which was very, very scary, because the dancer is moving a lot. She's like all over the place, and how you do that, I have no idea how you do that. But when I was discussing with the visual effects artist, he was also expressing a lot of concern, so much, right? But he managed, he managed to trace and do his magic. But it's scary. It's scary because, it's out of your hands, and it's a bit sort of like a magician, in some other office doing something, and then show it to you, and then you have to kind of see if it works for the shot, and if it works in the scene, a big picture. Yeah, it's a scary thing to do, but it can be also a door that opens, and you're like, oh, it's so interesting, And I think they're not, I mean, like, of course, I had a presentation before, so I was speaking about like sparks and this, you know. So now you guys go watch my film, already understanding that that's all CGI. So it's different from a person that doesn't have that and just watch as is, you know. So it comes across as real.
For me, to be honest, I'm not entirely. I think a lot of, I'm talking more feature films, I think they really can get quite ruined by, and you can get caught up in it. And I'm sort of surprised at myself for wanting to do something like that. And as I say, I didn't know the process. I didn't know how we were going to get there, because I think it's a very laborious process that, as a choreographer, I did get very fidgety as it happened, you know. And when I saw the first etch, I did get a wee bit teary, I have to say. I was a bit emotional about it. It worked! So, yeah, that's kind of my experience of it. I would do it again, but yeah, maybe I just don't like to overdo. I don't like things that are overly, obviously CG. Yeah.
I'll ask one. Rodrigo, you spoke about there being more no's than yeses in our work as well, and I think that happens. You know, we're applying for commissions, we apply for funding, we apply for film festivals, and there is a lot of letdown. I was also wondering for everyone, even some of the people in the audience, how do you keep yourself sane when that happens? No, I think it's quite a valid question, because a lot of us, I'm sure, we've had a time we're like, why am I doing this? Maybe I should just stop, you know? And so I just wonder, when you do get that rejection letter, is there anything that you do to, even from just going for a walk, or maybe even writing your next piece? And, you know, is there anything that you guys do to keep yourself, okay, let me continue?
You just have to keep going, like, regardless, you're not making this to please anyone. You're making this to please yourself, right? If anyone likes it, great, right? I mean, because if you depend on other people to like your work, you're going to be miserable, because there'll be expectations, and then when they don't come, you feel terrible. So, obviously, when we get recognition from festivals and from other people, it does propel us, you know, to keep doing, because you don't want to spend this money and spending all this time, and it's your little baby. You want to promote, you want other people to see you and a show around the world. I mean, if it doesn't get accepted, I think, you know, it's just part of it. And, you know, I've been there, and you never know. The next piece could be, you know, a failure in that sense. But, you know, if you accomplish a goal to finish the project, it feels so good. Mm-hmm. You finish the project, right? You think you achieved something new, you know, new boundaries, new accomplishments, new challenges. You know, that is the success, right? And then, yeah, whatever happens, happens, and we'll just do it for you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's like an audition, really. It's you kind of have to get a really thick skin about it, and I've had numerous rejections, and you kind of just have to shed it and go right and pick yourself up. And it's brutal, but in a way, we're doing it because we love it. I don't think there's any point if you don't love it. There's just not.
Like me, taking photos maybe. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, so like I just go outside and I take some photos with other like dancers actually, and then it's very strange, because like I just went out to refresh my mind, but like at the same time they motivate sometimes. So it's like with my dancers we take some like photos, like some movements, and then it just say maybe we can do this kind of screen dance later, maybe like that. So it's like getting some inspirations with that.
Right, yeah, so continue to go out there and find more inspiration,
Yeah.
for more work. And stuff. Thank you guys, awesome.
Just a point, when I was making pure dance films, I don't know how that reflects on me, but I got kind of 99% rejections, and I used to go under my duvet and think, oh God, I should just give this up. But anyway, I kept going. When we moved into film, we've actually got a few more acceptances. So now what I do, I've only started doing this recently, when I get a rejection, I email them back and say, oh, that's too bad, it's kind of your loss, but in a really nice way.
Yeah.
Next.
I've never been rejected from anything in my life, so I don't really. But I'd love to talk to you later and find out what's all like. I mean, it must be kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, dude, it's like, man. It's like,
No, actually,
We're going for coffee with Agnes now.
I just wanted to just respond as one random guy in the audience to something that Rodrigo said about I completely make my stuff for other people. I don't make my stuff for myself. I'd be interested to hear what the panel thinks about this. I want people to enjoy my films and to be moved by them. I work hard to do that, and my satisfaction comes from when that happens. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother to sending it to festivals. I was just making it for myself.
But then, if you don't get a satisfaction, you feel like it's a trap. Because not that you're going after, but there's some sort of expectation. So it's not going to be always here. Like our work is always great. Maybe we do one that is not so great. Maybe we do one that didn't get a good reaction. That we kind of pushed the boundaries too much, and people got loose. So whoa, what's this? It could be anything, right? I don't know. It's complex.
I was going to say, you can never really. I got into film because I thought I could really manipulate to the point that I can get everything across exactly what I wanted people to see. Where in the theatre, you've got everyone seeing from a different space, so they see it in a different way. But then that wasn't the case, because when I showed people my film, they had their own interpretations of it, regardless. And there's a great film by Maya Deren, I think it's Meshes of the Afternoon, which is the one with the, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this kind of creature with a mirror as a face. Yeah. And in this piece, she talks about, she didn't want it to be intellectualized, because as a character, she runs and trying to find this thing. And this thing is, in some writings, seen as the meaning. So as she's running and trying to find the meaning, it's getting further and further away. But as soon as she does find it, when she looks into the meaning, she just sees herself, because it's a mirror. So when we try and find meaning in things, they're most of the time based on our own personal experience of how we relate to a piece. So at the same time, you're still going to get 400 ways of people interpreting the work. So I just wanted to put that out there, because she's one of those people who would say, don't try and find meaning, because you're just going to find yourself when you look for it. So.
Anais Nin says, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are.
Right, exactly, 100%.
I find, for instance, perhaps a visual artist, a painter, a sculptor, I think, as they progress in their career, they are focusing on aesthetics that they developed, and they are strong about it. And you believe in those aesthetics. Some people will not like them. Some people will look and say, this is crap, right? But, what are you going to do? It's I don't think you can please everyone. And I understand your point of view totally, and I kind of see the value of that. And of course, I don't want to be saying that, it's just for me. I don't care about you. So it's not like that, right? Of course, I want people to like it, but at the same time, I feel like I don't want to lean too much on people's acceptance, right? My topics are usually dark. They are usually unorthodox. The visuals are weird. I know it's not for everyone. So I know that the level of rejection, or the level of sort of that this is too strange, it's going to be pretty high. Right? And I'm fine with that, basically. I'm totally fine with that. But, that's who I am, and I kind of so...
But Rodrigo, do you have a clear idea of who it's for? So it might not be for everyone, but do you kind of go, okay, here's the target audience for this piece?
I think it's a bit more intellectualized for the youngsters. I'm not saying that the youngsters will not get it, but I'm not sure if it's alluring to them, right? So I think it has to be a more mature audience, you know. But what's to say? I mean, like, I have 4 female characters. Does it mean it's going to appeal more to the female crowd? You know, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, because my
doesn't have
job
to
was
be that
like
way.
the funding application,
Yeah.
and it says, who's your target audience? How many people are you looking to reach? And I'm like, I haven't even made the pitch yet, and I've got to think of...
I just don't, I don't like when people usually say, oh, this film is for males between 17 and 25, and I'm like, so that doesn't mean I shouldn't like it, you know, or I try to avoid those labels because I find it to be kind of suffocating, and hey, there'll be a, you know, an odd kid, you know, 8 years old, they'll watch my film and say, yeah, I like that. Who knows? So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
If you could be any animal.
Tangent there.
Oh, I can answer that.
Cat, always,
Oh,
always.
Mine's meerkat. Yeah, I like it.
yeah, I'm a cat as well.
Anyway, I think we should wrap up there. Yeah?
What's your animal?
Yeah, what's your animal?
Let's see. Oh.
Don't think too hard.
I don't know.
Oh, you have some questions, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to make an announcement.
Make an announcement.
Yeah, go for it.
You should say that Rodrigo's film is not being screened in the international program, but is part of the awards selection, being judged, as it were.
Oh.
So just, and the reason why it's just because we just couldn't fit it in.
Yay!
Yeah, so,
Oh, thank you.
yeah.
So guys,
Anyway.
can we give another big round of applause for all of this? I hope this has been enriching, enlightening. It totally has been for me. I've definitely been listening more than I have been asking. I had 8 questions for everybody, and I was literally just been that. So thank you, everybody, and let's continue the talks. And enjoy the films. When's the next slot? 6 o'clock to 7. We've got the UK selection, and then 7:30 to 8:30 we have the final international selection, and then after that is the award ceremony. So please, you're welcome to join us. Great, see you then.
Can I just say one thing?
One more thing from Simon real quick.
It's
So,
Round of applause for Amari for being so great.